George Washington. George Washington was a fan of Madeira wine, a fortified wine he regularly imported from the Portuguese Madeira Islands. He also enjoyed cherry bounce, a spiced brandy-based cocktail on special occasions. More routinely, he drank beer and dark porter. Washington owned a whiskey distillery near Mount Vernon. When not drinking alcohol, he preferred milk, tea, and coffee. John Adams. John Adams also favoured Madeira wine. He commonly started his mornings with a glass of cider, often hard cider. He enjoyed tea, but gave it up during the American Revolution, considering it unpatriotic due to its British associations. Afterward, he primarily drank coffee. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was especially known for his love of wine, particularly French varieties. During his presidency, he spent over $10,000 on wine, equivalent to more than $200,000 today. He later advised Presidents Madison and Monroe on wine selections for White House events. At his Monticello estate, he attempted to grow grapes and make his own wine with limited success. He also brewed his own beer. Jefferson preferred coffee over tea and was particular about sourcing beans from the Caribbean and Indonesia. He roasted his own coffee. James Madison. James Madison drank coffee and tea, but consumed alcohol infrequently due to sensitivity to hangovers. When he did drink, he preferred whiskey and champagne. James Monroe. James Monroe enjoyed champagne as well as French and Spanish red wines. In his younger years, he was known to party heavily, sometimes going on quite a frolic, as it was called then. His favourite drink was Chatham Artillery Punch, a mix of tea, wine, rum, rye whiskey, brandy, gin, champagne and sweeteners. While president, he caused some controversy by purchasing 1,200 bottles of French wine with funds intended for furniture. John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, like his father John Adams, favoured Madeira wine and cider. He also regularly drank coffee and tea. Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson primarily drank whiskey and even ran his own distillery at one point. In 1799, his distillery burned down, destroying 300 gallons of whiskey. After paying excise tax on the lost whiskey, he unsuccessfully petitioned Congress for a refund. When not drinking whiskey, he drank coffee. Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren was also a whiskey enthusiast and was nicknamed Blue Whiskey Van due to his high consumption. He reportedly also drank buttermilk, a traditional liquid byproduct of butter making. William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison enjoyed hard cider. During his 1840 presidential campaign, political opponents mocked his cider drinking, but his supporters turned it into a populist image with the slogan "Log Cabin and Hard Cider," portraying him as a man of the people. John Tyler. John Tyler started every morning with a routine that included tea mixed with milk, which he famously drank from a very large cup. This was his preferred way to begin the day and provided a comforting ritual. Beyond tea, Tyler also enjoyed coffee and was known to appreciate champagne on special occasions. His drink preferences reflected a blend of simple daily habits and occasional indulgence. James Polk. James Polk had a clear fondness for champagne, often enjoying it during celebrations or formal events. He also drank some brandy and wine, though these were not his primary beverages. What really stood out about Polk was his dependence on caffeine. Coffee was a vital part of his daily routine. He started each day with a strong cup and often consumed it throughout the day to maintain his energy levels. For Polk, caffeine was more of a necessity than alcohol. Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor is known to have enjoyed milk, which was a common drink at the time. Interestingly, some historians speculate that Taylor's death while in office may have been related to drinking iced milk that was contaminated with bacteria. Beyond milk, Taylor shared a preference for whiskey with other presidents like Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren. Whiskey was a favoured spirit of his, fitting with the tastes of many early American leaders. Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore had a particular affinity for tea, especially oolong tea, which traditionally comes from China. This choice suggests an appreciation for more refined or international flavors. Fillmore wasn't known to drink much alcohol, but when he did indulge, wine was his preferred choice. His drinking habits were generally moderate, reflecting a more restrained approach compared to some of his predecessors. Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce's relationship with alcohol was quite different. He reportedly consumed almost any alcoholic beverage available and began many of his mornings with a glass of cognac. Pierce's heavy drinking extended throughout his adult life and contributed to his struggles with alcoholism. After losing his bid for re-election, he's said to have remarked, "There's nothing left to do but get drunk." His excessive drinking eventually led to his death from cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 65. James Buchanan. James Buchanan was a habitual coffee drinker, preferring his coffee black and strong. He drank it nearly every day as part of his routine. Like several early presidents, George Washington, John Adams, and John Quincy Adams, Buchanan had a strong liking for Madeira wine. He also occasionally consumed champagne, whiskey, and sherry, indicating a varied but controlled alcohol intake. Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was almost a teetotaler, meaning he mostly abstained from alcohol. While he did occasionally enjoy a glass of wine, his consumption was minimal compared to the norms of his time. In the mid-1800s, alcohol consumption was widespread and frequent, so Lincoln's limited intake made him stand out. Apart from this, he was an avid coffee drinker and is known to have appreciated strong coffee throughout his life. His moderate habits distinguished him from some other presidents who struggled with heavier drinking. Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson may have owned, or at least been involved, with a distillery in Greenville, Tennessee that produced brandy. However, his personal drink of choice was whiskey. Johnson's drinking habits were sometimes problematic. Notably, at his inauguration ceremony, he reportedly consumed too much alcohol. This led to an incoherent speech that embarrassed him and made headlines at the time. Ulysses Grant. Ulysses Grant was known as a heavy drinker and struggled with alcoholism throughout most of his adult life, much like Franklin Pierce. However, it did not take much alcohol for Grant to become intoxicated, which made his drinking well known. Surprisingly, his favorite alcoholic drink was champagne. At one White House event he hosted, he reportedly spent $1,800 on champagne alone, equivalent to over $45,000 today. When he wasn't drinking alcohol, Grant favored lemonade. He even mentioned in his memoirs that he often drank lemonade while on horseback, finding it refreshing after long rides. Rutherford Hayes. Rutherford Hayes was a committed teetotaler who never drank alcohol. He was also a strong supporter of the temperance movement, which advocated for banning alcohol consumption and sales. Hayes's wife, Lucy, was even stricter about temperance and enforced a no-alcohol policy at the White House during his presidency. Because of the constant presence of lemonade in the White House and her dedication to temperance, Lucy Hayes earned the nickname Lemonade Lucy. James Garfield. James Garfield supported the temperance movement, but did occasionally enjoy beer. However, as he aged, he gradually reduced his beer consumption. In addition to his moderate drinking habits, Garfield was known for being a fan of milk, particularly with breakfast. His stance reflected a moderate approach to alcohol, aligned with the temperance ideals of the time. Chester Arthur. When temperance activists pressured Chester Arthur to ban alcohol from the White House, he declined to do so. Arthur enjoyed wine and brandy occasionally, balancing those with his habitual consumption of coffee and tea. His approach was more moderate and flexible compared to the strict abstinence of his predecessors. Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland was a big fan of beer and consumed it regularly, especially in his younger years. His fondness for beer was so pronounced that he could be compared to a regular at a bar, often socializing with friends over drinks. Later in life, Cleveland recognized that his drinking was negatively affecting his health. He resolved to limit himself to 4 beers a day, a goal that proved challenging enough to lead him to switch to larger beer mugs as a compromise. Benjamin Harrison. Benjamin Harrison, despite possibly being lactose intolerant, had a strong preference for milk, which he drank regularly. Beyond that, Harrison maintained a strict diet and avoided indulging in anything extravagant, including alcoholic beverages. He was another teetotaler among the presidents. Interestingly, he also enjoyed what was called hot clear soup, which was essentially hot tea, serving as a soothing and simple beverage choice. William McKinley. William McKinley favored rye whiskey, and his presidential campaign even inspired a popular cocktail named McKinley's Delight. This drink combined rye whiskey, sweet vermouth, cherry brandy, and a dash of absinthe, reflecting the tastes of the era. There is also evidence suggesting McKinley enjoyed grape juice, which was a non-alcoholic alternative gaining popularity at the time. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt was famously a coffee lover, reportedly drinking up to 1 gallon a day, which matched his energetic and vigorous personality. He also enjoyed an alcoholic cocktail called the mint julep. Roosevelt took pride in using fresh mint grown in the White House garden for his drinks. The mint julep was so popular among his cabinet members that Roosevelt used it as a social tool to invite them over for tennis matches. William Taft. William Taft enjoyed coffee regularly, incorporating it into his daily routine. He wasn't a heavy drinker, but when he did consume alcohol, he often chose champagne. His drinking habits were moderate and reflected a balanced approach to beverages. Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson preferred alcohol to caffeine, with a particular fondness for scotch and whiskey. His presidential campaign song, "Wilson, That's All," was humorously based on a slogan from Wilson Whiskey, linking his image with the popular drink. Wilson also enjoyed orange juice and frequently served it at the White House. Although Prohibition began during his presidency, Wilson and many others continued to consume alcohol despite the ban. Warren Harding. Even though Warren Harding was president during Prohibition, he regularly smuggled whiskey, sometimes carrying it in his golf bag, which may explain his inconsistent golf performance. Harding was also a fan of cocktails, with his favorite being the Gin Rickey, a refreshing mix of gin, lime juice, and soda water. He often modified the recipe by adding orange juice. Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge had a fondness for apple cider, often making it himself from apples grown in his personal orchard. Although he didn't consume much alcohol, when he did, he preferred Tokay wine or a martini. Coffee was also a regular part of his daily intake. Herbert Hoover. Before Prohibition, Herbert Hoover enjoyed drinking wine. During Prohibition, he apparently abstained entirely from alcohol, possibly influenced by his wife Lou, who reportedly made him discard his wine collection when the ban took effect. After Prohibition ended, Hoover returned to enjoying martinis as part of his beverage preferences. Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, like his distant cousin Theodore Roosevelt, was a serious coffee aficionado. FDR loved a strong dark roast and went so far as to have his staff roast the coffee beans right in the White House kitchen. He was personally involved in overseeing the roasting process to ensure the perfect cup. During World War II, when coffee was rationed due to shortages, FDR set a patriotic example by reusing coffee grounds to brew fresh coffee, even though the resulting brew was reportedly quite awful in taste. Aside from coffee, Roosevelt enjoyed cocktails and had a particular fondness for the Bermuda rum swizzle, a tropical concoction that mixed rum with fruit juices and was refreshing during his presidency. Harry Truman. Harry Truman was known for starting his day differently than most presidents by taking a shot of bourbon, which was his preferred alcoholic drink. His fondness for bourbon was well known and even legendary. Like President Van Buren, Truman was also a fan of buttermilk, a somewhat unusual beverage today, but quite common in the past. He was once quoted as saying, "If you want to get along with me, give me buttermilk," showcasing his genuine affection for this traditional drink. Alongside bourbon and buttermilk, Truman enjoyed coffee and lemonade, the latter being a favorite refreshment, especially in warm weather. Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower, affectionately known as Ike, was a prolific coffee drinker who reportedly consumed excessive amounts during World War II to stay alert and energized through the long hours of wartime leadership. He was also a fan of Scotch whiskey and was known to enjoy a glass even after suffering a heart attack while in office, despite medical advice to cut back on alcohol. This sneaky indulgence demonstrated his attachment to Scotch as a comfort drink. In addition to his love for coffee and Scotch, Ike had a surprising liking for vegetable juice, which he would often drink, reflecting a somewhat health-conscious side of the president. John Kennedy. John F. Kennedy had a broad and varied drink palate that reflected his dynamic personality. He regularly enjoyed coffee and tea, which were staples of his daily routine. Kennedy also liked beer and lemonade, which rounded out his refreshing beverage choices. Surprisingly, he also enjoyed coconut water, a fairly unusual drink at the time, which matched his cosmopolitan image. His favorite alcoholic beverage was the Bloody Mary, a classic cocktail mixing vodka with tomato juice and spices, which he reportedly enjoyed during brunches and social occasions. Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson, known for his larger-than-life persona, had some unique beverage preferences. He frequently drank Fresca, a grapefruit-flavored soda, and often mixed clear soda with Scotch whiskey. In keeping with his down-to-earth style, he sometimes drank Scotch out of plastic or styrofoam cups, adding a touch of practical humor to his drinking habits. LBJ was also famous for installing a panel with 4 buttons next to his Oval Office desk. Each button dispensed a different drink, coffee, tea, Fresca, and a custom-made mixture of grapefruit juice and soda water, which he named simply Johnson. This quirky feature highlighted his penchant for convenience and his love for these specific beverages. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon had a somewhat complex relationship with his drink choices. He was known to enjoy milk and coffee regularly, maintaining a traditional morning routine. Nixon was also a connoisseur of fine red wines and frequently indulged in expensive bottles that would cost hundreds of dollars in today's currency. However, he was famously stingy when hosting guests, serving them cheap red wine but cleverly covering the labels so they wouldn't know they were getting an inferior product. This sly tactic earned him the nickname Tricky Dick. Nixon's wine habits showed a blend of sophistication and cunning that matched his political persona. Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford had relatively simple and straightforward drink preferences. He drank tea and orange juice almost every day, incorporating them into his routine as refreshing and healthful choices. Ford also enjoyed martinis, often having one or more at lunch, which fit the classic image of a mid-20th century statesman. His balanced approach to beverages reflected a moderate and traditional lifestyle. Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter's drink choices were rooted in simplicity and Southern charm. He favored lemonade and coffee, beverages that were staples in his home state of Georgia. While Carter didn't drink alcohol very often, when he did, white wine was his preferred choice. Notably, Carter was something of a winemaker himself. He once cultivated about 15 acres of grapes at his Georgia home, producing his own wine. This hobby underscored his appreciation for viticulture and added a personal touch to his relationship with wine. Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan began most mornings with coffee and orange juice, two beverages that energized him for the day ahead. He also had a passion for red wine, particularly varieties produced in California, reflecting his roots in the Golden State. One of Reagan's favorite cocktails was the Orange Blossom Special, a refreshing mix of vodka and orange juice which complemented his sunny California persona. Reagan's drink preferences combined health-conscious choices with a taste for classic American beverages. George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush loved coffee but gradually switched to decaffeinated coffee as he aged, likely for health reasons. Alongside coffee, he enjoyed Diet Coke, beer and vodka. His beverage choices reflected a blend of traditional American drinks with the increasingly popular low-calorie soda trend of the late 20th century. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's favorite beverage was coffee, an essential part of his daily routine. He also enjoyed iced tea and was known to drink soda, particularly Diet Coke, which became a staple during his presidency. When it came to alcohol, Clinton favored the snake bite, a drink made by mixing hard cider and lager beer. His beverage choices demonstrated a mix of classic Southern preferences and contemporary American tastes. George W. Bush. George W. Bush was known for his fondness for Miller Lite beer in his younger years, but he significantly reduced his alcohol intake after turning 40, eventually quitting altogether. After giving up alcohol, Bush's go-to beverage became Diet Coke, continuing the trend of several modern presidents favoring this particular soda. Like his father and Bill Clinton, Bush also enjoyed coffee regularly, maintaining the classic presidential caffeine tradition. Barack Obama. Barack Obama stood out from many of his predecessors by preferring tea over coffee or soda. His favorite tea flavors included green dragon tea and black forest berry, showcasing a preference for a variety of tastes. While he occasionally drank Diet Coke, Obama was notably the first president to have beer brewed at the White House. The White House Honey Ale was crafted with honey harvested from the beehives on the South Lawn, connecting the president's appreciation for local and artisanal products. Obama also enjoyed beer on occasion, balancing his tea habit with traditional American brews. Donald Trump. Donald Trump is famously devoted to Diet Coke, reportedly consuming as many as 12 cans a day. He is also a teetotaler, which means he has abstained from alcohol his entire life. Trump's intense preference for Diet Coke is almost legendary, making it his signature beverage choice throughout his presidency and beyond. This marked a sharp contrast to many other presidents who favored alcoholic drinks. Joe Biden. Joe Biden is another teetotaler, making him the second consecutive president to abstain from alcohol. His favorite drink is orange Gatorade, a somewhat unconventional choice for a president, but one he reportedly enjoys frequently. Biden also drinks coffee, continuing the long-standing presidential tradition of starting the day with a caffeinated beverage. His beverage habits reflect both personal health choices and a connection to American popular culture.